It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Daniel Eshel. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Jerusalem. And Daniel, I so appreciate you giving me the time and speaking about being born in France during the Shoah.
It's my pleasure to be able to convey the message. I call myself Daniel Eshel, and we translated the name from Ladenheim, which is an Austrian name, meaning Laden is a shop, Heim is home, and Ladenheim is sort of inviting Laden is to invite, einladen, Heim, home. So to invite home, we found Eshel as Abraham planted an Eshel in Beersheba, and Rashi there explains that Eshel is Achila, Shtiya, and Levaya, eating, drinking, and accompanying a person on his way. So I've used the name Eshel. I was born as Daniel Henry Ladenheim in Paris in 1941. That's a time when the Nazis were in Paris at the time. My father had been taken away previously and had been sent to a concentration camp in France. There was a large number. And I had no idea if he knew that I was born, if he knew that I existed. Yeah, that was something which went with me for many, many years until finally I found out, and I shall tell you in the course of the discussion, or exactly when I finally discovered it. I have here a presentation which I use whenever I give a talk on the Shoah, Here it shows you in Hebrew the places from where in Europe people were sent to Auschwitz. Yeah, these are extermination camps which were in Poland. Yeah, this is Paris where I was born, and people went from here. They came from Italy and from Greece and from whole of Europe. Thank you, my wife. This is a picture of the France, the map of the locations of detention sites. It's unbelievable the number of detention sites that were in France. This was a demarcation line between the France that had been occupied by the Nazis, and this was, in inverted commas, free France, yeah, in the south of France. But as you can see, there were detention sites all over the south of France as well. And then from these places, they took the Jews to camps where they were from where they went to Auschwitz. The first one is Bon-la-Hollande. This is where my father was. This is Drancy, a very well-known one, and for years I thought this is where my father came from. Here we see a picture of 1941, that's when I was born. The German officer and the French policeman saluting to the Germans. Therefore there's no doubt that the French were quite happy, acceptable to the Germans, and Germans were acceptable to the French. This is a standard picture of a Jewish boy, could be a Jewish boy in France at the time. He has a Magen David on which is written Juif, which is Jew in French, Juif. and this is how it looked. This is a Magen David with a Jewish and a Jew, which everybody had to wear, and children, adults. This is a notice which was outside one of the houses in French. Ici, maison juive, n'achetez pas. Here is a Jewish house, you mustn't go shopping there. So anybody who feels that it was just the Germans, this is an example of the French doing their share in the... This is a standard picture of the Jews being taken by train to the detention camps. They are led by a French policeman. The French did all the organizations. The train is a French train. And the people went and they were thinking that they were going to work camps. Yeah, they had no idea what was going to be. My father was taken away in 1941 as well, before I was born, and my mother was certain that he was just going to work and that he would come back. This was the atmosphere. This is the camp, one of the camps. It appears in this book, which we saw previously, the picture, and here we have the picture which is now on the screen. This is the same picture. No, this is another picture. This is a picture in the camp, and what's important here is that my brother, who sent me the book, writes, "I remember this," which means that my brother remembered coming to visit our father in the detention camp. It was sort of an open detention camp. They could go in, they could send parcels, they could send food, they could visit. Yeah? And this is another picture from the same camp, from this book, yeah, in which you see the women coming to meet their husbands that had been put in the detention camp.
Can I ask, how old was your brother when he went
My brother was 2 years older than me. I mean, he was born in 1939, also in Paris. Yeah, and 2 years older than me. That means in 1941 he was 3, 4. Yeah. And
he remembers going to the...
Well, that's what he wrote in the book. Yeah, he says that he remembers it, so I presume he does. Yeah, I suppose it's quite very traumatic and something remains in your mind always. This is a letter. I've got a copy of it, but I think it's sufficient to see it on the screen, where I finally found out that my father was my father. It's a letter written by a neighbor of ours. Yeah. What was the name? Hochberg. A neighbor of ours by name of Hochberg, that my brother went to visit them and became friendly with them. And this is a letter which the father, who was a good friend of my father, sent to his family in 30th of May 1941. And it's in French. The first part is from Bon-la-Rolande. The first part is general things. Please send to me eggs and other things which I need. And here where my finger is, Ladenheim, that is my father, me monté un telegram, showed me a telegram qui a reçu, that he received de l'hôpital, from the hospital, en je sais qui comme suis a femme, that the woman, that she gave birth to a little boy. yeah, and that he is, and that they are very happy. Yeah, and this is a letter saying that I was born.
The little boy is you.
It's me. This is the first time in the 1960s that I was in my 20s, that I had evidence that my father knew that I had been born, which to this day is I've got feelings for it. Yeah, brings tears to my eyes. Okay, so
because until then you saw the letter, you didn't know that your father.
Until I saw this letter, I had no idea that my father knew that I had been born. Yeah, this letter was written in 30th of May. I was born on the 26th of May, and he was taken away before that. The, 50 years after the first convoy went off in 1942. It's in Serge Klausfeld's book. 50 years later, in 1992, Serge Klausfeld organized a train that left Paris with exactly 1,000 people on it and went all the way to Auschwitz. I was on the train, and I went around, and Serge Klausfeld gave us a file giving us information of things which we did not know. One of them was that my father had been seen in August 1942. Yeah, that means he was alive then. After that, there's no evidence that he was alive. So I went on the train, and we went to Auschwitz. It was very moving period. We left in the morning. We arrived there the following morning. We went around the concentration camp. We said Kaddish. We had a few speeches, and we went immediately back. Serge didn't allow us to buy anything, even not water. He says, "You're not having anything from this cursed land."
Was this the first time you had been back, that you had been to Auschwitz?
Auschwitz. First time, last time, and the last time. Yeah. This, you see the camp of Auschwitz with the electrified fences. These are the where the people slept, yeah, on the bunks. Yeah, you can see it now if you go to Auschwitz. It's there to be seen. This is gas, which was used to gas people. It took time for the Germans to develop a system by which they could kill a lot of people in a short time, and they finally decided to using gas, putting everybody into a room, telling them it was going to be a shower, and instead of water coming out of the shower, it was gas.
I think it was Zyklon B.
That's right. From the from the book and other lists, I found my father's name. There, where my finger is in the picture, is Ladenheim Julius. Comes from Vienna. Yeah, Polish passport, and this is the address where we lived. Yeah. Where am I? I've lost myself. 90 Passage Brady. That was the house where we lived. Yeah, and this is a first list in French. Then you have a list which was at the camp, at the detention camp. Again, my father with a number, Julius, born in 1910, coming from Vienna. And the French and the Germans kept records of exactly everybody and everyone that went through their hands. Yet another list, with my father at the top of the list here, done by hand, Julius with a number. This is order in German giving instructions to send the train from Paris to Auschwitz. What is important here, or what is I can refer to, is that on the train 1,038 people were on that train. The Germans insisted on 1,000 people on the train, and the story goes that if they had only 900 and something, then they were sent outside the police to collect a few more Jews in order that it should be at least 1,000 people. And this is the order from the Germans to send the train. This was in 1942. Again a list, with my father's name on it. So many lists, it makes you wonder what for. This is the only picture I have of my father, my mother, and I presume my brother. It can't be me, so it must be my brother. This is the only picture I have of my father, only picture, and only picture of my father, that I have, and it brings feelings of it was my father, that I had a father, and that he did exist.
Can I ask, Daniel, how did that picture survive?
How did it survive? I have no idea.
And it's the only picture you have of your
only
father?
Picture. Here is an interesting thing. Let me see if I can find the original, because it is interesting. Yes, I've got it here. This is a file that Serge Klaasfeld prepared for us on the train with a whole lot of information of what's going on. This is the passport. What you see on the screen is my brother's passport, Marcel Ladenheim. This is mine, Daniel Henry Ladenheim. Once I became, this is a photograph.
That is the original photograph?
Yes. Once you became an orphan in France, you became an enfant de la nation, a child belonging to the nation. And there would be no possibilities of taking me out of France. My aunt, my mother's sister, had gone from Vienna to England. And after the war, she decided that she wants to try and find my brother and myself. She knew we were with non-Jewish people. Let me go back a bit. I was born in 1941. I presume I was with my mother for about a year. After that, my mother gave me and my brother to German-speaking people, non-Jews, who were willing to look after us. We don't know exactly why they were willing. My family was called Fromm. My brother's was called Le Riche. We're not sure why they were willing, but a possibility is that my mother had enough jewelry in order to pay for it, that we should stay with them. And during the war, we were with these families. I have vague memories of the family with whom I was. In 1944, when I was 3, the children were taken out of Paris because there was a concept that the Allies were going to come in and that the Germans were going to burn Paris. Yes, there's a film on this. Paris is burning. And so all the children in Paris were taken out of Paris and sent to camps outside Paris. The family with whom I was from sent me as well, and I went with all the other children to this camp. When the war finished, when France was liberated, or at least Paris was, we went back from the camps to the families. I remember coming off the train and standing in front of me two ladies, one tall one, Madame From, and one shorter one with black hair. I immediately ran to Madame From, and she said to me, "No, this is your mother." And that was the first time I met my mother that I remember. My brother, I'm not sure what went on with him, but we met up with my mother in Passage Brady, in where we had lived before.
Did your brother go to a different...
I don't know. I don't know exactly.
You weren't together?
We weren't together. I should ask him sometime. We were with our mother at least 2 years, 44, 46. My mother stayed in the house with no means of bringing food into the house, of doing anything. Why did she wait? From what I understood, is because she was hoping that someone would come and give her news about her husband. People were coming back, very few, and there were stories. And she was waiting and waiting and waiting. And then she had a mental breakdown. And the question was, what happens to the two children, my brother and myself? My brother fortunately got to know a nice couple of dancers from the Folies Bergère, Olga and Esther Mazzoli, who showed interest in taking him in, because he was nice and he was ginger and he was sweet and all the nice things. But they said they don't want me, because I was smaller and dark and not sweet. But Olga had a boyfriend, Hubert Souchon, and he said, well, my parents would be only too happy to have a little Jewish child and to convert him to Catholicism. So I was taken to Madame Souchon, a nice lady, Catholic, and I became a religious Catholic, going to church on Sundays, and every night on my knees next to my bed, above my bed, as a sign of Jesus, and praying for I don't know what I was praying for, what I was told to pray for. Yeah, and I lived with them for at least 2 years with this family Souchon. In 1948, my aunt from England came to France to look for us. Now, she didn't know any French. She knew English a bit, she knew German. I don't know how she did it, but she did. She found my brother, and then she found me. When she came with my brother to where I was, because I knew my brother and because the aunt looked like my mother, I went willingly. And the families, both Souchon and Olga and Esther Mazzoli, were willing to let us go. Quite unbelievable. And in order to get out of France, we needed a passport. We couldn't get a French passport, so my aunt went to the Austrian embassy and got us an Austrian passport. There's a picture there of my brothers, this is mine, yeah, in order that we could get out of France. And
this is the original?
This is the original, yeah. And here is a picture of me at the age of 7, yeah, in the passport. This is when I renewed the passport at a much later date, yeah. And this is the passport with which enabled me to go with my aunt to England.
Daniel, can I just ask you at this stage, when you first saw your mother, when you were reunited, did you have a close connection? Did you feel very emotional?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't remember any emotions. I went from my mother to this from I went back to my mother. From them I went to Souchon. From Souchon I went to my aunt. I was moving around, and it never for 1 minute bothered me.
And yeah. What happened to your mother? What?
That's afterwards. Okay, let me finish this. Yeah. So.
But when you heard that when you saw your mother and with your brother, was your mother very warm to you?
Don't remember. I don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember the meeting. Yeah. Don't know how it was. Okay. So my aunt took us, and I overnight from an Orthodox Catholic child became an Orthodox Zionistic person, and it didn't bother me. Yeah, I was quite able to handle the two situations, yeah, as it was. Something basically wrong with me, that I have no feelings. Yeah, the story I tell was in May 1948 when I was with Madame Souchon. She came in one evening and told me I should be sad. I said, why? She said, the Jews have gone back to Palestine, and that's a terrible situation for us Catholics, because the Jews should not go back to Palestine, and therefore we have to be sad. And therefore I was sad, yeah, because I was told to be sad. Yeah, and that night I prayed to Jesus and hoped, who knows what I prayed.
Did you know that you were Jewish?
Yes. And that I was going to be saved and I was going to be a Catholic. Okay, so this is a passport that I show. This is a letter which my aunt sent to Olga and Esther Mazzoli in France, telling them that we're doing very well and we're very happy. I couldn't care two hoops. It didn't bother me at all where I was. My brother is different. He regretted having left the nice ladies and going to our aunt in Manchester. I was used to religious prayers, etc., in French to a God. He came from ladies that were not religious at all, and he couldn't really take the religious atmosphere, even though he was only 9, that my aunt and uncle were trying to instill into us. This is a letter saying that we're very happy. This is a letter, yeah, written in English. We hope you received the postcard. You received the postcard. The children will soon be used, etc., etc., telling her that we are doing excellently. There's a place called Roglit. It's on the way to Gush Etzion. It's very close to Ma'aleh HaChamisha. And there they've got an andarta for the French Jews. They have taken the book of Serge Klarsfeld. They've taken out the pages with the names, the lists, and have stuck it onto the wall. And so you have the 80,000 names on the wall, or in Roglit. And every year at Yom HaZikaron, there's a ceremony at the at this place. And I went at the beginning on my own, and then later on I went with my wife, and then later on I went with my children and my grandchildren. Here we have about 10 grandchildren. The numbers doubled since 2012, 2022, 23. There's twice as many grandchildren, but we still meet up there and have a sort of a picnic. Yeah, and the kids, the grandchildren love it. Yeah, the picnic of the partisanim, as if we were partisanim and we survived. Yeah, I have 6 children. Yeah, here we have Elia, and we have Vardit, and we have Libby, and who else have we got? 3 children. I think there's only 3 of them here. Yeah, that's Libby's husband. Yeah, there's only 3 of the children, and that's Elia's wife. Since then, most of them come. Yeah, because it's quite a chagiga, get together.
And very emotional.
Well, now it isn't. Now it's just a picnic. Yeah, yeah. We go around. We light candles next to the names of my father and my grandfather. My grandfather also appears in the book. Yeah, my father was in the 5th convoy. My grandfather was in the 50th convoy. Yeah, and we light a memorial candle next to the names. Yeah, in memory. When they have a ceremony, then I have opportunity of saying Kaddish, yeah, at this place. And this last picture is of my brother Marcel, who came to visit me here in Israel. Yeah, who's, as you can see, is quite happy. Yeah, and I'm behind him, even happier.
Where does he live?
He lives in London. He lives in London. He's a dentist, and he gives, I think, a monthly talk on the Holocaust. He has a list of schools from the Ministry of Education, and he goes to these schools and he gives them a talk, yeah, on the Holocaust. And sometimes he gets some very nice letters of appreciation, yeah, and sometimes there's a video, and this is one of the things which keeps him busy. You asked me a question about my mother. I said that in 46 approximately, she had a mental breakdown. She was hospitalized, and she stayed in the hospital for quite a long time. I remember going to visit her, and she saying that she doesn't want to meet me, she doesn't want to speak to me. Yeah, I should let her live her life by herself. In the 1960s, they decided to close down the hospital, and they were going to send her to a family, to live with a family. And she said, well, if I'm leaving the hospital and I'm living with a family, I want to go to my family in Israel. So they said, well, why not? So my brother and myself went over to Paris, bought her a ticket and put her on a plane to Israel as a tourist. And here in Israel, her sister, which is my aunt, and her mother, which is my grandmother, and her brother, my uncle, were waiting for her at the airport and received her. And she lived for a number of years in Kiryat Bialik with my aunt. Yeah, and I went and visited her, spoke to her. We had difficulties in communication because she knew German, had forgotten her French. I knew English and Hebrew and didn't make it very convenient to talk. I regret that I didn't interview her and have a video, to be able to answer a lot of questions which I wanted to, which I now would like to know and ask her why, where and how. But that's how it goes.
And when you took her to Israel, you and your brother, did you feel a closeness? Did you feel a...
No, it was our mother. We treated her as our mother, and it was no, it wasn't. There was no closeness.
Maybe she was so traumatized from what had happened. Do you know what happened to her during the war? During the
no, that's one of the questions I should have asked her. No, I don't know where she was hiding. While we were with these families, I'm not sure where she was hiding. Presumably she went around checking up that we're doing okay, and had some hiding place, but I don't know. She should have been going around Paris with Magen David written on a Juif.
The yellow sign.
I'm not sure she did, otherwise she would have been taken in by the French police, by the Germans. So I presume she didn't go with it.
And you and your brother, you're very close with each. You have a close connection?
We lived, my brother and myself, we lived together in Manchester from 1948 till 1959, 58, 59. My brother then went to study dentistry, and I left to come to Israel on a course for leadership course for youth movements, Machon Madrichei Chutz Laaretz. And I spent a year in this, in which I learned Hebrew and learned a bit of history and learned a few other things which were important. Got to know Israel a little bit. During that year, during that year, my madrich, my counselor, was Rav Chaim Druckmann. Then he was just Chaimke. He was just a counselor, and he decided that I needed a little more strengthening on the religious side of it, and he organized for me to go for a year to the Yavne Yeshiva. So after the Machon, I got permission to spend another year here in Israel in the Yeshiva in Yavne, and where I got a little Judaism, Yiddishkeit as we call it, and knowledge on the Jewish what Aron Sfarim HaYehudi, the bookcase of the Jews, and I spent a year there. After that, so while we were in Manchester, my brother and myself were two brothers. We lived together. He was a very sportsman. I was never very sportive, and he only took me to play football when he needed a number 11, and he only took me to play tennis when he needed someone to play with. But otherwise we weren't too close. Once I went to Israel, the relationship became weaker. In '61, I went back to England and became a leader of Bnei Akiva in the north of England, Manchester being my base, but being responsible for Leeds, Sheffield, Sunderland, Liverpool, and other towns in North England. I was busy with Bnei Akiva. I also studied mechanical engineering. Yeah, and my fellow students just couldn't believe that I studied 5 days a week. Yeah, and that on Shabbat I didn't do any studies because it was Shabbat, and on Sunday I did no studying because I was busy with Bnei Akiva, and they were shocked that I could get through the courses. I didn't aim for more than a pass mark in the course of engineering. I didn't really enjoy it, yeah, but that's engineering. Yeah, it wasn't really made for me. I wasn't really made for it. I finished my first degree BSc with not a very high grade, which I was a little embarrassed. And a professor in the course, Skarecki, a Polish man, said, "Look, I'll take you in to do your masters because you were very good in my courses. Yeah, and it's worth your while doing a master's in order to cover up your not too good degree in your bachelor's degree." And so I stayed another year and a half and did a master's degrees in mechanical engineering and continued helping out in Bnei Akiva. In 66 I came on Aliyah. On the way I married my wife. Yeah, that's a story, another story which isn't for this video. And came to live in Merkaz Shapira, which is a little townlet north of Ashkelon. And there the rabbi was Rabbi Druckmann, yeah, the person who was my madrich, my counselor. And became there the head of the technical school. And I was there for quite a while. And then in 1973 there was a Yom Kippur War, and naturally I went as a soldier. I would belong to the artillery, and we went down south, and we crossed the canal. Yeah, and we were quite active as artillery. But my brother was terribly worried what's happened to me. And he took a plane flight to Israel. On the plane was Kissinger at the time. And he came to Israel and he went to my uncle, who was a military man, and said, organize that my brother should come away from the front lines to come and say hello to me. So my uncle organized it, and I left the front lines for 2-3 days and went and met up with my brother. And since then we've been very close. Yeah, obviously this changed the situation. Yeah, the fear, my brother's fear that maybe something could happen to me, yeah, and that he would not have a brother. Yeah, so since then we've been quite close. Up to the corona, he used to come quite often. Since the corona, he's been here once. We speak at least twice a month on the phone, on the internet, yeah, and I give him a report of how wonderful Israel is, and he tells me how terrible it sounds on the media in England, yeah, saying how terrible things are, and I tell him that it's all lies because it's wonderful here.
And can I ask, Daniel, the family in Manchester, your relatives that took you and your brother in?
In Manchester, my aunt.
Your aunt.
They came to Israel.
She must have been a very special lady.
Yes.
For her to go to find, not knowing the language, to go to the families and to basically take your brother and to take you.
No doubt.
A tremendous courage.
And to bring us up for 10 years. Yeah, without any experience, a little child of 7, a little child of 9, and she managed. Yeah.
Was she married?
Yes, to my Uncle Max.
And did they have children?
No.
So you and your brother were like their children?
Yes,
And you kept a close connection with your aunt?
Yes, oh yes. Oh yeah. I certainly appreciated what she was doing. Yeah.
It is incredible. It's so special. Sure.
Gita, is there anything else I should have said?
What I would like to ask...
One thing, Gita?
I have to think.
You have to think, okay. Yes.
Then, with all what you went through and having to learn the Christian religion, and did you ever at any time, well, when you had to, you were so small, you had no option, but when you were growing up later on, you always kept your emunah, your faith, you always kept your belief in Hashem?
Yes.
Even though knowing what had happened to your father and your grandfather?
Yes. Yes, I always had, probably the year which I spent in the yeshivat, Yavne helped, to give me my emunah b'Hashem. But I've always had emunah, and I always believe in the miracles that happened to me, that I survived, and that I'm normal. Well, more or less.
You are incredible.
Plus minus. And I came out quite well with 6 children, over 20 grandchildren, and life is good. And I'm happy here in Israel.
And Daniel, can I just ask, it's a hard question, but having been born in France, and you showed us the picture of the deportation where you don't see any Germans in that picture. You just see
the French.
You just see the French policemen.
Just the French. The French did everything for the Germans.
How is your feelings towards France? Because you were also saved by French.
Yes.
So it must be very ambivalent.
Completely ambivalent. I've been back to France more than once, and I know that all the European countries are anti-Semitic, including England. I'm fully aware of that, and this is why we came to Israel. Because they're all anti-Semitic, and there's nowhere in Europe where a Jew can live, and be proud of being a Jew. And
did you feel any anti-Semitism when you're growing up in Manchester? Or
in Manchester, definitely yes. When I went to school, it was a technical school at the age of 11. We Jews were separated. We were dealt with separately by the other children. Reminding us that we are Jews. Some of the teachers always also reminded us that we were Jews. On Fridays, we would have to leave in the winter. We would have to leave the school early because Shabbat comes in early in the winter. So I remember some teachers said, go out. But I remember one teacher said, the Jews are now going out of the classroom. And he didn't really love us. So that was in school. When I get to university later on, I went around with a kippah. And there wasn't, in those days, any anti-Semitism in the university. Or I certainly didn't feel any. I walked around with a kippah. I was proud of being a Jew, a religious Jew.
Which university did you go to?
Manchester. I went to the College of Technology, which later became part of the UMIS, University of Manchester College of Technology. I didn't feel any anti-Semitism. When I used to walk from our house to Bnei Akiva, we went in groups because there was non-Jewish people, children, who would cause us problems on the way. Knock off our hats, hit us, and do things like that. And we always went in groups. wouldn't go wouldn't go on wouldn't go on our own on Shabbat, yeah, because it wasn't pleasant. I can't say it was dangerous, but it wasn't pleasant. But in university, I didn't feel any anti-Semitism.
And can I ask, the friends when you were at school, did you go to a Jewish school?
Up to the age of 11, I went to a Jewish school, Borden Jewish. At 11, you take an exam to decide whether you go to grammar school or not. The very bright kids go to a grammar school. The mediocre kids go to a high school, that's my brother. And the not too good kids, that's me, go to a technical school.
And can I ask, when you were in the Jewish school, did any of the other kids ask you, because your accent must have been different to theirs?
I was always a foreigner.
Did they ask you
throughout
about...
my life I've been a foreigner.
Did they ask
and I come to Israel, I'm still a foreigner.
But did they ask you about the Shoah or the Holocaust?
I don't, at that age, no. Yeah, in the junior school, I don't remember ever talking about it. Yeah, I started talking about it when I was in the high school, in the framework of Bnei Akiva. That's where I started giving talks, showing the shows, pictures, and the slides. In those days, we used a videograph and put a shakef.
I think it was transfers.
Transfers.
I remember.
Yeah, I've still got them here. Yeah, transfers on this and show it to them. And I started it through Bnei Akiva giving talks. Yeah, to Bnei Akiva on what was involved. What's interesting, what I found interesting. I only became emotional later on in life. When I when I had grandchildren, did I become emotional on the whole issue? Yeah, because I realized that I was saved. Yeah. Until then, it was a story which I told, which I told it quite dry. Yeah, without too much emotion involved in. But once the grandchildren appeared, and things changed.
And when your children were growing up, did you speak about the Shoah?
Oh yes.
So they knew.
They knew.
It wasn't a secret.
No. They knew right from the beginning. Yeah, they used the story in there as themselves as madrichim, as counselors in Bnei Akiva. Yeah, and. Vardit, one of the daughters, made up a few stories in order that it could be more acceptable. Yeah, but they knew exactly who, where, what I am. That I'm originally born in France, and my accent is French. Yeah, and my grandchildren sometimes make fun of my English accent, because it's got a little R is a little rolling like a French, and they sort of said, Saba, you just said, yeah, very, very good, yeah, and I said, oh, sorry, very good.
Daniel, if I can ask you, what message do you impart to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations?
First of all, being fully aware that the non-Jews in the world are mainly anti-Semitic. Why are they anti-Semitic? Nobody really knows. When they are successful, they're anti-Semitic because they're successful. And when they're not successful, they're anti-Semitic because they're not. Yeah, there's something about being Jewish which makes people annoyed. And therefore, my message to the younger generation, to future generations, is don't trust the non-Jews at all. The other thing is that the only place for us to live is in Israel. We've got our problems in Israel. We've got anti-Semite Jewish people who cause us a lot of problems. Yeah, we've got a split in our society between the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, non-Orthodox, etc. We have to fight and make things better. But this is the only country. Now I'm getting emotional.
No, it's very moving. It's very.
But this is the only country where we can feel that we are safe and that we can fight for our freedom. I took part in the Yom Kippur War. I was away for 6 months. Yeah, our unit crossed the Suez Canal. We were on African soil. Yeah, and it was quite. Some parts of it quite dangerous. Later on, I took part in the Lebanese First War. There's been 2 Lebanese wars. Yeah, the first Lebanese wars I took part, and there we went up to Lake Karun, which is quite north of the border. Yeah, and cleared up the area. Yeah, I was already older, and at that time, my second son, Erez, had his bar mitzvah, and there was a question is, would they let me out for his bar mitzvah? So my wife wrote a very moving letter to the officer, and he let me out.
Wow. Well, I just want to thank you, and when you show the pictures of your children and grandchildren, that's really the nakama, and the nachama as well. It's the revenge and the comfort.
Lelo safek.
So then I am so grateful to you. This has been absolutely, there are no words to tell you how grateful I am. And if you can just show that picture, then I'm
this
still...
one?
Yeah,
my parents?
To think that this picture of your parents, it's the only picture you have of your father.
Only one.
This is so valuable. This is the original.
Yes.
And your mother, and I don't know, it's just your story, and it's phenomenal. It's miracles, and Daniel, what I find unbelievable is, just as you said, that there were righteous Gentiles that took you in, but they wanted to convert you as well. So it's bittersweet. It's so difficult, but there were French that were informers, and there were French that risked their lives to save Jews as well.
Definitely, yeah.
So that is...
I mean, it was a miracle that I was born in Paris and survived, because in this book you have lists of children that were taken from the hospital where I was born, Rothschild, directly to Auschwitz. Yeah. Toward the end, there's a whole lot of...
so there were 80 convoys of 1,000 people on each convoy?
Yes.
And you personally met Klausfeld, you were together on...
Yes, on the train to Auschwitz.
And you've never gone back?
No.
Would you allow your children to,
yes,
grandchildren to go on their routes
to...
Oh
yes, they've been, at least 3 of them have been on journeys to concentration camps, yeah, to see what it's like, yeah. And I will let them go, and I will let the children and the grandchildren, they should see and they should understand, yeah, what went on there in that period of life. I started saying that miracles. It's a miracle that I was born and survived. It is a miracle that I had a circumcision. I have no idea how. I should have asked my mother, but it's too, yeah. How
during the occupation? During
the occupation in occupied Paris, they managed to do a circumcision. There's a miracle that this family from took me in and looked after me during the war, yeah, in the occupation. It's a miracle that later on the family Souchon took me in, even though they wanted to convert, yeah, but Lord Almighty stopped that. It certainly was a miracle that my aunt Miriam found us in France and managed to get us out of France with all the problems to England. It's a miracle that I'm religious. And then eventually, not so much a miracle, but God's hand, that I came on Aliyah to Israel, and I found a place where I should live and willing to fight for the country.
Well, you should continue to inspire, and I know you told me that you spoke at Badechad for the officers, and you are such an inspiration to all of us, and you are such an example for all of us to emulate, and I'm so grateful to you. And you should just have mazel and bracha, you and your wife and your family, and just have all of Hashem's blessings, and to be well, and just
Amen.
Bezrat Hashem, just be well and have mazel and bracha forever.
Amen, amen. Okay,
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much.